The following is a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club.
Strong round-robin tournaments, and it is a pleasure to bring you the action for a very nice event here with one of my best friends. I'm Grandmaster Alejandro Ramirez with Grandmaster Cristian Chirila.
Alejandro, such a pleasure to be back with you in the studio.
Absolutely, and what a great initiative we have for you. It might not have the fireworks or the glamour of the Singfield Cup, but these are important round robins for upcoming players. We have collegiate players, we have junior players, we have players that are barely teenagers in this event trying to become stronger at chess, but they're already established grandmasters. Cristian, tell us a little bit about it.
This is what I love about the St. Louis Chess Club. It takes the players all the way from the scholastic level to the top, to the US Chess Championship level, to the Singfield Cup level. And now we also have the 25 to the 2700 level, which in the past it was a bit neglected. I love to see these players back on the board competing against the best chess players in the United States. Such a pleasure to watch.
Absolutely. These are some of the best in the world, including, but they're still trying to reach that elite level, right? There's still players that are trying to break the 2600 barrier. There are players that are still trying to break the 2700 barrier, but it is difficult to do so in open events. It is a much better battlefield for them to practice in round robins. So let's take a look at what we have in store for you for the next week and a half.
Absolutely, and we're going to start with the fields. We're actually going to look at the Group A first. Alejandro, take us through that.
Group A has a lot of known stars, a lot of local players as well. Jeffrey Shong, one of the best players in America, as well as Sam Savion. They have been vying for the top junior spot for quite a while. None of them are juniors anymore, but they're still very, very young. Local players, Ray Robson and Ilya Nishnik, as well as Dario Scherz, are the 3, 4, and 5 of the group, all of them over 2650 FIDE.
And we have a young, rising superstar, that is Hans Niemann from the United States. He went last year, he was 2500 all the way to 2640 in the span of 1 year. That is simply brilliant. We have Mikhail Antipov playing under the FIDE flag. We have Aram Hakobian, a collegiate player, Alex Lederman, and Camille Dragoon from Poland, another collegiate player.
Yeah, this is a group with a lot of collegiate players. We'll be talking about that later. We actually have some of our students in this and the B group, but let's take a look at the next one. We have Robert Hongaski representing America, as well as Elshan Moriarty and Christopher Yu, all of them very high rated, trying to get up there in the ratings. Christopher has had a tremendous year, going from high 2400s, finally getting his Grandmaster title at the tender age of 15, and of course, rising in the rankings. Meanwhile, two collegiate players, JJ Alimarandi, my student that goes to St. Louis University at 25-24, and Titus Stramavicius from Lithuania, but of course a longtime student of UT Dallas.
And another collegiate player, Sam Kanin, from playing under the FIDE flag, and he's actually an active student at Texas Tech right now. Chris Repka, also an active student at Mizzou, and Abhimanyu Mishra, the youngest grandmaster in the world at only 12 years of age, Arman Mikhaelian, and Harshit Raja, another collegiate player. Tell us a little bit about Abhimanyu, Alejandro.
Abhimanyu definitely was the sensation of last year when he broke Sergei Karyakin's record to become the youngest player to ever reach the Grandmaster title. Did it at barely over 12 years of age, which is just absolutely incredible. And these are the type of stepping stones that these kind of players need. They need to fight against other Grandmasters, some of them established, some of them uprising. But it is important for players like Abhimanyu to measure themselves against some 2500s and 2600s.
And let's take a look at the schedule, Alejandro. What do we have?
Let's take a look first at the format, as we have two round-robin tournaments, pretty straightforward. Time control, we have classic chess, 90 minutes for 40 moves, plus 30 seconds for every move that you make. And once you reach move 40, you get an extra 30 minutes. Now, players are not allowed to draw by mutual agreement before move 40. They can, of course, repeat. 3 full repetitions still will finish the game, but there will be no agreements here for the half point.
It's going to be a very competitive and combative event, and let's take a look at the schedule. We start today with round number 1. It started at 1 p.m. and every other round is going to be at 1 p.m. except the last one, Thursday, March 10th. That one is going to start 2 hours earlier at 11 a.m. All times are in Central Time. Also, we're going to have playoffs if necessary. To be noted, we are starting the commentary 2.5 hours after they make their first move.
We get the good stuff. We're going to go right into the juicy bits of the game. No opening bogged down. We're just going to see what is the most interesting. And speaking of most interesting, let's take a look at the pairings. Let's see where we start here with Group A. And already we have some amazing matchups for you. Jeffrey Shong, the highest rated player in the group, will be playing against Misha Antipov. That's going to be a very exciting one. The rising star Hans Niemann facing against Ray Robson. Established chess player Alex Lunderman, who used to go to Webster, will be going against his former teammate Aram Hakobian. Meanwhile, other former teammates, Camille Dragoon, who represents Poland, will be playing against former Polish player Dario, who now represents America, also one of my students at St. Louis University, finishing up his degree this semester. And I think the key matchup of the day, not only because of the strength of the game, but also because of how wild it is at the moment, will be between Ilya Nishnik and Savion. We have them there on camera fighting it out. This was definitely a roller coaster of a game. But before we go into the details of that, let's go and see who we have on Group B. It is Abimanyu Mishra playing against Titus Stramavicius. Arman Mikhailian will be playing against Sam Hanin. Elshan Moriadabadi against Harshid Raja. In the battle of collegiate chess, Chris Repka representing Mizzou will be playing against JJ Alimarandi representing St. Louis University. And finally, we have the youngster Christopher Yu with the black pieces against a very active player in Robert Hungaski. Definitely a generational clash here, as Robert has played chess all over the world, recently playing even in Montevideo just 2 weeks ago, and now is here playing in this tournament. Some of these players have traveled just to every continent playing chess, and it shows in their expertise. So, without further ado, let's take a look at that game that to me was absolutely fascinating. If Cristian, you can take us through the game of Ilya Nishnik and Sam Savion.
Yes, absolutely, Alejandro. That is one of the key matchups of the whole event. Very, very high-rated players playing against each other as early as round number 1. And we have a fire battle, fury battle on the board. Let's see how it started. It started off with the English, quite quiet. C4, E5, knight to C3, knight to F6, knight to F3. And at this point, Black made the first big decision. Of course, the natural way to continue the game is to just simply play knight to C6, defend the pawn on E5, and after that we're going to have a very tense battle. White can go G3, E3, D4, a lot of ways in which both sides can play this position. Instead of that, Black decides to go with this novel approach, this move E4. This has been touted by Keimer Vincent, especially recently in December at the World Chess Championship, World Rapid and Blitz Chess Championship, with quite decent results. It looks like a blunder because after knight to G5, well, how are you going to defend this pawn on E4? It seems like this pawn is overextended. You can defend it with queen to E7, but that's not going to help much because I do have another attacker coming into the game. That queen from D1 to C2, and now there's absolutely no way in which you can defend the pawn on E4. The pawn is lost. Your position is in complete shambles. So what can Black do? Well, at this point, he said, okay, you can have my pawn. I'm just simply going to build up in the center and on the aisle. He played the move C6. Now, of course, C6 makes a lot of sense. You want to play D5 if you would have this extra tempo as Black and just connect these pawns, and that's going to be a beautiful position for Black. Of course, White can simply take on E4, which was played in the game. But another very interesting alternative at this point is to just simply stop this move at D5 with the move queen to A4. Of course, you can play D5, but after C takes D5, well, unfortunately, C takes D5 back is an illegal move because you're pinned. So after queen to A4, the most typical move is the move queen to e7. Now I'm defending this pawn on e4. But right now we see the idea behind this maneuver. Queen to a4, queen to c2, attacking the pawn on e4. And what's the reason why I wanted this queen on e7? Well, first of all, this bishop on c8 is no longer protected. It doesn't look initially that it plays a major part, but after d5, I'm just simply going to be able to take, and now we see the action of the queen on the c file. I can play knight takes d5 and the position is completely lost. You can take back, but after queen takes c8, you're going to lose absolutely everything in this position and the game is over. Queen to a4 was a move that was not known by Ilya Nishnik. He immediately took this pawn on e4 and we have this position, d5, c takes d5, c takes d5, knight to g3. And this is what I was mentioning about both an attack in the center but also on the side with the move h4. I'm trying to displace this knight from g3. Very, very tense approach. And of course you have to make some space for this knight because after h4, right now if you play a move such as d3, a very natural move, well, h4 just finishes the game because the knight doesn't have anywhere to go. e4 is protected, f5 is protected, everything else is protected. So he played the move e3, h4, and now bishop to b5. This looks like a good decision. Of course, you're speeding up your development as white with tempo, with a check. But unfortunately, it's not that good. Let's see why. After knight to c6, knight to e2, immediately h3. Now with the bishop on f1, the light squares around the king and around the king side would have been protected. Right now, those light squares are not protected. So white is in trouble. We see g3 and let's speed up a little bit. Now we see a bit of a shuffle, a dance of the queens right now, if you might. Queen to e5, bishop to e7. Black is not in a hurry. He's playing a long game. All he's focusing on is the light squares. Bishop to b2, king to d8. Now I want to play rook to e8. I also want to free up this bishop to go potentially to d6. And this queen actually is going to be in big danger. For example, if you play just castle, for example, after bishop to d6, your queen is trapped in the middle of the board. This is big, big trouble. So that's why Ilya played the move f4, creating this extra square on g5 for the queen. He would exchange the queens if bishop d6 would be played, and this would actually be a very good position for white with an extra pawn. Of course, instead of that, he played the move queen to g4. And now this is where we stand. At the moment we entered an endgame with the opposite color bishops, we see, well, this has petered out more or less into a very equal position at this point. Alejandro.
It happens very often. Let me pull that board right up. Despite the big complications, sometimes in chess, despite all of those complications, there are possibilities where material gets reduced very quickly and some of the strategical elements left make the game more or less dead drawn. As you can mention, Cristian, these bishops are of opposite colored. This means that it is very difficult for either side to create any kind of advantage. Also, neither side has an extra pawn. We did see that through the complications of knight e6 check, pawn takes e6, rook f4, this very nasty double attack, recovering the piece, a very nice find by Ilya Nishnik here, this knight e6, pawn takes f5, rook takes, and everybody got off the board. A vacuum cleaner came in. And unfortunately, this just doesn't allow either side realistic winning chances. We expect this game to end in a draw with no more real play left, unfortunately.
And Alejandro, if you can go back a couple of moves,
yes.
Could you explain to me this move c5? Because I think it has a very deep strategical idea behind it.
The move c5 definitely guarantees the draw as you're taking two pieces off of the game. But the question is, why didn't he just preserve, if you were, the pawn? You can see that this bishop on d4 is currently attacking here on g7, but I could move it, right? I could just play the move g6.
Also, it's not under attack because the rook on b4 is still hanging.
Pinned, right?
Yes.
Though, that being said, I don't have a lot of useful moves that I can see, and what I'm starting to worry is that if the white rooks start getting some kind of coordination, you can imagine the rook coming to b1, the rook coming to b7, this bishop establishing itself on a powerful dark square, that I wouldn't be worried about how many pawns I have. I wouldn't be counting the pawns that I have. I'll be worried about the coordination that the pieces have. And you can see this bishop on d7, really bad. It's not going to go anywhere. Actually, it is hemmed in by its own pawns, and you can start understanding why Sam said, you know what, I don't want my extra pawn. I want to force the draw immediately. And I actually think that's a very smart, practical approach.
I do agree with you, Alejandro. C5, very beautiful. And right now, the players are speeding up. I have a feeling we're going to see a draw agreement reached very, very soon. Let's take a look at another important game of the round, and we're going to jump to the B group. Exactly, that is the game that I wanted to talk about, the one between Robert Hungaski and Christopher Yu, because we saw a very tense battle in the opening. Let's see what happened. D4, Robert started with, knight to f6, knight to f3, d5, bishop to f4. The London, this has become some sort of a meme in the chess world, if you might. Everybody seems to be creating YouTube videos about the London. Everybody likes to be playing the London. Some people don't like it. I myself included, I'm not a big fan of the London. Some people love it. And we see Robert Hungaski, bishop to f4, bishop to f5, c4, e6, queen to b3. Now immediately attacking this pawn on b7. Knight to c6, knight to d2, of course. If you take on b7, the problem is that after knight to b4, you're going to have huge difficulties defending both against this move knight to c2, but also against any sort of rook to b8, and the queen is going to get trapped. We're going to make a draw. For example, rook to b8, queen takes a7, rook to a8, queen to b7, rook to b8, and the queen doesn't have anywhere to go. That's just going to be a forced draw, forced repetition as early as move 6. Well, Black definitely wants that, White not so much. White is trying to play for an advantage. That's the typical way to play as White. Also, let's not forget, Robert Hungaski is the rating favorite in this event with 25.54. So after knight to c6, he decides to go knight d2, defending against the idea of potentially knight to a4, knight takes c4, defending this pawn on c4. D takes c4, and at this point, Robert had a very smart decision to make. Well, very difficult, and a very smart move would have been queen takes b7 instead of queen takes c4, taking this pawn and creating a lot of tension on the light squares around the queen side. After knight to b4, it looks as if the knight is coming to c2 with deadly dangers. Well, not so much, because after rook to c1, knight to c2 is just simply going to be met with king to d1. It loses a vital tempo. And despite the fact that this king is on d1, it seems like potentially he's not going to be able to castle. But after knight to d4, well, you cannot do that because your rook on a8 is hanging and you're simply losing the game. So this position, knight to c2, wouldn't have been, I don't think this is what he missed, what Robert missed, because he spent 10 minutes, oops, sorry about that. He spent 10 minutes at this point when he had this decision about taking on c4 or taking on b7. Let's see what he calculated. So after queen takes b7, knight to b4, rook to c1. What I think he missed was the idea after knight f d5. Now this defends the pawn on c7, at the same time attacks the bishop on f4. So it's a very nice tempo move, and it looks like Black has a very decent position. But a big tactical motive right now is queen to b5, with the idea that after c6, queen takes c4. I'm allowing you to take my bishop on f4. It looks like Black is just simply a piece up. The problem is that this pawn on c6 is going to fall, and there's going to be tremendous consequences after that. I'm just simply going to attack your knight, your defender of the pawn on c6. And if you try to move around, I'm just simply going to take. You cannot defend with queen to d7, because that queen is tied to the defense of the rook on a8. You have to go king to e7, and after e4, now we see Black's position simply crumble.
Yeah, and it is unfortunate that he wasn't able to find this nice tactical sequence, because it was surprising to me going over the game at how much trouble he got in so quickly after taking with the queen on c4. If we can go into that position, queen takes c4 was actually not approved by the computer. We're taking a look at that game before we started commentary. And after the moves h6, e3, I'm going to speed up a little bit, but it was very clear that Black has finished development by this point. All of his pieces are out, the king will castle with no problem, as we did have that draw we were expecting between Ilya Nishnik and Sam Savion. And if we can go back to the board, Black has everything they wanted. They got a good control over the center, they have very fluid development, they're going to castle without any problems, and White's the one that's actually a couple of tempi away from doing so. And it was this one tempo that really caused white here. This nice move, queen d5, very precise, attacking the pawn on g2, forcing a reaction from his opponent. Of course, you cannot play the move e4 because d4 is undefended. But after castle, instead of just castling, and I think after either long castle or short castle by black, black is fine. But at this point, they're looking for more. And they move the pawn to e5, puts pressure on the pawn on d4, wants to create an isolated pawn, and that's exactly what happened. Rook fd1 takes, knight b3, rook d8, again, not allowing white to comfortably recapture on d4. He wants to make sure that there's going to pawn on d4, and this just became a very unpleasant endgame to play for Robert. It did surprise me that this collapsed very quickly for Robert. You'd think he would put up a lot of resistance, but the way that he did it, especially with this move a4, giving up the b4 square, I wasn't a big fan of. And the more moves came on the board, the clearer it was. The black's position is just absolutely dominant. The pawn on c7 is the only weakness, but it can always be defended with knight d5 or with c6, where the knight on b4 is going to be defending this pawn, where this rook is the one that's going to be causing havoc on white's position. Both the g4 pawn and the e3 are weaknesses. This knight on b3 is very, very far from the action, and it seems to me that black's position is simply superior, and actually that white's position is on the verge of collapse. Yes, it's true, you have a passed pawn on d4, but you can compare the power of the knights, you can compare the weaknesses here on the king side, and of course, rook takes g4 is currently on the board. Curious for you, up a pawn, up material, up on time. I just think he's going to be cruising for a win on this one. And speaking of cruising to a win, in the matchup between Mizzou and St. Louis University, one of the classic matchups in collegiate chess, well, it didn't go my way this time. My student, Jamil-Jan Ali Marandi, has lost to Christopher Repka. Cristian, tell us a little bit about how that went down.
Well, we're definitely going to take a look at that game, but I think we're going to have Chris in the studio to tell us all about that game. That one was very interesting. I do want to look at other games as well, because one that dragged my attention was this one between Lenderman and Aram Hakobian. These players used to be teammates at Webster University. Right now, I think Alex Lenderman is no longer on the team. He graduated and moved on to other things. Aram Hakobian still an active student at Webster, and let's see how this played out, because right now it seems like black is, well, pretty much in the driver's seat. It seems like he has a very, very good chance of winning this game. This would be a huge result to start off the tournament. d4, knight to f6, c4, g6, and I've seen Aram play this type of structures with both white and black, with the move c6, follow up with the move d5. This combination, this symbiosis between a Grunfeld and a Slav structure. So after c6, knight to f3, d5, bishop to g2, bishop to g7, we exchange, and we see this position. By the way, this is all theory for a very, very long time. Knight to e5, bishop to f5, and white is having very, very difficult time finding a way to an advantage in this type of structure. It's extremely, extremely difficult to find that elusive advantage. e6, take on c6, and we have this position. It looks innocuous. It looks like it's just going to head into an easy draw, right, for a black. But actually, black wants more than just a draw. He says, okay, you have a big weakness on c3. I'm going to be able to attack that. I do have a weakness as well on b5, but I'm easily defending that with the move a6. I'm going to be able to protect my pawns with other pawns. How are you going to protect the pawn on c3? That is the big question. And this is what he did. He exchanged the dark square bishop that would have been the defender of the pawn on c3. And now we have this position. I really like this move g5, trying to go to g4 and creating some more weaknesses on the light squares. And we have this position right now after a lot of moves, some simplifications. Of course, white is going to take the a6 pawn. I'm going to take the b pawn, but my pieces are more active. My rook is ready to invade. Your rook, not so much. You can give me a check, but my king is going to go to f6. You don't have any weaknesses to attack. And this is the big difference in this position. After rook to b4, bishop to e2, defending the second rank, but this puts the bishop in a very passive situation. You're just going to stay and wait for me to come closer to you. I'm going to potentially play the move king to g5, maybe f6, maybe e5. After that, I'm going to break through at some point in the center. And that's when we're going to see your weaknesses play an important role in the assessment of this position. I see black having an easy path towards an advantage for a very, very long time.
It's very difficult to defend that, not only from a theoretical point of view, but also the practical point of view that you don't have a concrete plan with the white pieces. You have to be defending the entire time. You know that the rook is coming to this second rank. You know that f6, e5 might be an idea, and you have to defend basically move by move, parrying your opponent's threats without able to create any of your own. Speaking of such a situation, I think we should jump to one of the key matchups in Group A. I want to see the game between the top-rated player, Jeffrey Shong, and Misha Antipov, one of a very talented player here that is very soon going to be fighting in the collegiate chess leagues, as well as he is also part of the Mizzou team. But this one, something went very wrong for black in this position. We can skip over the opening and evaluate just this position directly. You never really want to see a configuration in which all of your pieces are on the back rank, but the king is the one on the second rank. Something clearly went wrong here for the black side. This king is way too exposed. White has the pair of bishops. There's a lot of expansion here with the e5 and f5 pawn. And if bishop takes f5 is not playable, I can imagine that this position is going to be collapsing within a few moves.
And the problem is, starting from the beginning of this endgame, another problem, forget about the time management, forget about the two bishop advantage. The problem is that Jeffrey loves to play this type of positions. These slow maneuvering positions. He loves to have this type of strategical advantages, such as the two bishops, and he has this constant pressure. And he's a very, very good player at building that pressure up.
Yeah, and the pressure is certainly there. It seems very difficult for black to even find a move, but let's now not forget about the time pressure, because he does have 1 minute left. That is, Antipov has 1 minute left for the remaining 28 moves.
Are you kidding me? 28
moves
no
in
way.
1 minute. I don't put his chances
18
of survival.
maybe, 18 moves.
Sorry, 18 moves. I'm very good at math. Thank you. 18 moves, but still, 18 moves in a minute. Now you're not gonna make it. Yeah, I don't see this going well for the black pieces. I expect Jeffrey to pick up his first point. Jeffrey, one of the strongest players in the Spring Classics, actually won 3 of them. Always loves to participate in this. He always says it's great practice, even when I'm 2,700, to come here and play against such players. But we do have a guest in the studio, as we have the first decisive result of the 2022 Spring Chess Classic, with Chris Repka defeating JJ Alimarandi.
Thank you, Alejandro. Yes, we are here with Chris Repka, a student at the University of Missouri. Chris, first of all, tell us, how does it feel to finally be back here in St. Louis playing at the St. Louis Chess Club?
It feels great. I was very upset 2 years ago when the event got cancelled. And I'm happy to be here. It's good food here. It's high quality tournament, good players. We have like 6 different types of drinks offered to us for free while we're playing. It's very nice.
Definitely the St. Louis Chess Club treating everybody like the professional that you guys are. Tell us a little bit about your game. It seems just a spectacular victory for you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I was playing an opening that I analyzed with our coach, Cristian, and he thought that it's not such a good opening, but I told him that I just enjoy playing it. And I'm happy that I proved it today, and I think that Alimarandi confused his opening prep a bit, and that helped.
Let's actually take a look at that game. We're going to see that on the screen right there, Chris.
Let me pull it up. I think I have it up. Yep.
There we go.
And it must be this move h4 that you're referring to. I love how Leach has already put a dubious mark on it.
Exactly, yeah. h4, I like it. It's not that great for white if black knows it precisely, but I feel like white gets a small advantage everywhere, and it's an attacking position, a lot of options for both sides.
Right, so take us to a couple of the key moments of this game. We do have kind of an unusual setup here for black, right? With the early knight c6, knight e5, and it
I
just
know
feels...
that if you go back to here, I know that good move. What I was worried during the game was that he would play knight e4.
Knight e4.
And the idea here is that the knight will always have either the g4 square or the e5 square. There's no way for me to get rid of both. And I looked at this position a while back, but I wasn't exactly sure how to play it with white. So I was worried that he'll do this. And this, I think that this is one of the best things black can do.
Right. Instead, he put the bishop on g4, a more ambitious developing move, but it became very awkward for him after bishop e2, bishop takes f3.
And it feels like also this move, bishop to g4, commits to taking on f3 and relieving the two bishops after bishop takes f3. Because if you take on f3 with the knight, then after g takes f3, you're losing a tempo. You have to retreat with that bishop, and that cannot be good for black.
It feels like the move bishop g4 was basically wasted. Yeah, this didn't appeal to me very much. Bishop takes f3 must have confused his openings, because after g takes f3, it's clear that f4 is coming, and as Chris was mentioning, it's important to have both the e5 and g4 squares there under control.
It's still possible to play this with h5, and then I think that after bishop e3, e6 is a strong move, or one of the good moves. It's a playable position. I would probably play something like king f1, and just a normal game, but what he did is he played e6 immediately, which I think he confused his prep, because this cannot be good after f4, h5.
And it didn't seem good. It seems like black's pieces are just too passive. The knights are not putting enough pressure in the center. Remember that white has a lot of trumps here. They have the center, they have the pair of bishops, and it's clear that they're going to be castling on the queen side, and immediately they can even push the pawn to h5, as Chris did, breaking open that king side or harassing the bishop like happened in the game with the move h6. So let's go through it a little bit. I was surprised.
Very much Lila style, yeah, this h5, h6. It doesn't seem like that pawn is going to be a tremendous asset, much more of a liability, but it just accommodates this bishop on f8 tremendously.
Yeah, this bishop on f8 is just not going anywhere. And actually, the way that JJ played this position surprised me a little bit. The move queen f7, I thought castling long was in the books, but he decided, actually, I'm going to castle into the jaws of the lion, playing bishop e7 and short castle. And the lion, well, he closed his mouth.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, after I wasn't expecting castle long, castle short. Like after castle long, bishop e7, I was thinking to maybe like play f4 immediately, because that would avoid him playing castle short. But I was like, no way, like castle short can be good. Like I'll play king b1, and if he castle shorts, then I'll be probably happy anyway. Which king b1 kind of forces him to maybe castle short, because I'm slowly improving my position while it's unclear what black can do.
What were you planning on doing if he was castling long at this point?
Good question.
Were you going to take that pawn on a7?
You know, I was gonna calculate that. Bishop a7 was definitely in my thoughts, but I don't know if it works. It might work actually. c5.
c5, yes.
Very nice. Can't take with the knight because this undefends the pawn on b6. B takes c5 is probably going to get checkmated by bishop a6 check. And the same applies to d takes c5. Actually, I'm not so sure about d takes c5.
I'm also not sure. I would be calculating it after he would play castle long.
Although I have to say, I don't believe in this for black at all. This looks very, very sketchy.
Perhaps after d takes c5, an interesting move would be to go queen to a4.
Yeah, I like queen a4
And now if you go king to c7, maybe I can even take on b6.
You can take on b6. That might work. I was thinking if bishop b5 also works.
Oh my goodness.
I think at this point...
bishop b6 works. Yeah, that's just mate.
Bishop b6 is just mate, right? Let's show that line. King takes, queen a6 check, king c7, check again, king c8, and the bishop joins the fray with deadly consequences. Yeah, this is quite lost. But castling short wasn't that good either. The rest was quite solid, a good performance. I like this pawn sacrifice, just opening up more stuff on the king side. And at this point, this is just not going to be stopped. You actually want to get rid of the pawn on h6 for free to allow your rooks to participate in the attack. So there's very little black can do to defend. And the rest was simple for you, Chris, just finishing it off in style. Well, a nice victory here. Move rook g8, of course, distracting the rook from the defense of the queen. And that's all she wrote. Well, nice early victory here in the tournament.
Thank you. Yeah, first rounds are always kind of all over the place, so I'm happy to get the victory.
Well, Chris, thank you very much for joining us here in the studio, and good luck in the rest of your games.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, let us go back into some of those key positions that we have left. I would like to see how much progress Christopher Yu has made since we last talked. It seems like he's still up a pawn. This knight has maneuvered to d5 to cement this pawn on b6. And again, I'm comparing the powers of the pieces. This knight on b3, it still needs to be remaneuvered. I'm surprised it stayed on b3 for so long. If you take a look at when this knight came here, it actually came back on move 16. 16, knight b3, and ever since then, the knight has really not done very much. It's about time to move it. I think the idea for white is to play the move knight d2 and c4, but I don't really believe in it. This must be too slow. There's still a couple of practical issues that black has to deal with. Of course, the weakness on b6. You still have to figure out a way to coordinate your king side. In particular, the rook on g5 is a bit on the awkward side. But if I can solve those problems, I would be very happy with my winning chances here with black. It doesn't seem like it's going to be holdable for Robert in this position.
Absolutely, and I want to take you guys to an interesting game that we were actually discussing, Alejandro, at the beginning, before the beginning of the broadcast. That big game, big clash between Hans Niemann and Ray Robson in Group A. This is a very tense battle, and you were mentioning this moment. We see once again this four knights type of English setup. We saw e4 in the main game of round number 1 in Group A, the one between Ilya Nishnik and Sam Savion, which finished in a draw. But knight to c6 was the much more natural approach. And now we see this idea with e4. Bishop to b4, d3, we're seeing this setup with this triangle in the center controlling the square d5. d6, a3, bishop to c5, b4, bishop to b6, and this has become a very popular line at the top level. I think Fabiano Caruana actually is playing this both with the white pieces and with the black pieces. He is one of the main proponents of this setup. Knight to a4, it seems like black is just losing the two bishops. But in fact, with the position in the center sort of closed, the two bishops are not as important. So let's see what happened. Bishop to g4, bishop to e2, bishop takes f3, exchange on f3, queen to e7, potentially eyeing a long castle. Bishop to e3, knight to d8. That's not what he was eyeing. He was eyeing a reshuffle of the knight on c6 all the way to e6 and potentially controlling the square d5 with the move c6. Bishop takes d4, take on d4, castle, castle, and this is the big moment that we were discussing, Alejandro, and we saw this move g5, which, by the way, is the top engine move, and I'm trying to understand why. Why is g5 the top engine move? It seems like a very modern chess-like move, right? It wants to go knight to e6, king to g7, and actually just take more space on this side. It says to white, okay, your knight is completely out of play on a4, so you're not going to have enough pieces to create a dangerous attack against my king on the king side, because I have a lot of pieces surrounding it and defending it like a fortress. I'm going to get this knight to e6, a knight next to the king in this type of attacking situations is a very good defensive piece. Two knights next to the king is even better, of course. And maybe potentially I'm even going to start thinking about expanding on the king side and creating an attack of my own, potentially king to g7 followed by rook to h8, h5. If I manage to get the move h5, h4 and open up the king, well, who knows who's going to mate who? And this is exactly what black was saying. So immediately Hans took advantage of the fact that he still has a superiority on the light squares with the move bishop to g4, knight takes g4, queen takes g4, king to h8, and now we see this expansion and blow up of the pawn structure on the king side with the move f4, a very typical way. Once again, I'm still not sure about this knight on a4. This is the big problem for white. If you would be able to remaneuver it and get it, let's say, knight to b2, knight to d1, knight to f2, knight to g3, knight to f6, or knight to h3, knight to f4, if you would be able to get this knight on the king side, then your position is actually strategically almost winning as white. But let's see if he managed to get there. He's trying to get there. c5, eyeing this square c4 for the knight. And now we have this position, knight to g6, rook to c1, rook to c8. And I believe this is the move.
Well,
this is the final move. Oh my goodness, what
C5.
happened? c5. Alejandro, what do you think about this position?
I'm actually kind of shocked. I was ready for your explanation of the strategic elements of the position. I was very happy with what you're saying. And then suddenly, this move, c5 by Ray Robson, pretty much shocked me. I was expecting pretty much anything else. But c5, blowing open the position on the queen side. I'm a little worried about potentially taking on c5, not caring so much about my knight on a5. This knight on a5 has been the bane of white's existence for the last, I don't know how many moves. And if I can solve it by either sacrificing it or putting it on b7 and then taking on
That's
d6.
exactly the point that Hans missed, because he played the move rook from c1 to f1. So he missed this critical moment to take full control of the position with the move knight to b7.
This is actually starting.
It's just winning.
It's also interesting complications, right? I think I have to take.
Sure, you
on
can take, and
e4,
I can take on
on
c8.
Take on c8.
Now I take on d6.
I have to give a check, because
Sure.
otherwise all of my pieces are hanging, right? Knight's attacking c8, queen e5 is a threat, b takes a3 I don't believe works. So rook check, let's go king
King g2. How are you going to untangle? Because I have some very serious threats right now as white. Potentially queen to a8,
Queen a8 is a
followed
very
by knight
serious
to
threat.
f5. That's going to be a checkmate.
Yeah, that's probably a bigger threat than anything else, right? Because you could imagine that if b takes a3, I don't quite have the time to pick up this piece. This is a fork, picking up that queen. But remember that this pawn is still alive. So the king goes to g7, the knight takes on e5, and who's going to stop this pawn coming down the board? But as you mentioned, I'm a lot more worried about this kind of situation. Can't really defend the back rank with any of my pieces. The king has to go forward, but I would be shocked if after knight f5, black can survive more than a couple of moves.
There is no survival here.
There's no survival here.
Absolutely not. King f6, queen to d8.
Yeah, we can just go into this variation. And I think the easiest is just here and move the knight pretty much anywhere, right? Knight takes d4, I think just works.
Oh, yeah.
Knight takes d4, and that picks up the queen. You have to sacrifice the queen on f4, but that's not nearly enough for black. So that was a missed opportunity, apparently. Rook cf1 was played instead, doubling the rooks, a logical move, but perhaps not the most tactically sharp. The move queen e7 is now played, a little bit of a consolidation move here, defending the pawn on f7 against potential sacrifices, although I could still consider it. And what happens on knight b7 anyway? I'm kind of wondering.
Well, right now I do have already a defender on the pawn on d6, so potentially maybe I can just simply go rook to a6.
Okay, 6, although I'm still concerned about pawn takes c5 again. Although I have to say, this queen on e7 is a lot more stable than it was on g5. You don't have rook f5 attacking with an extra tempo. It does defend the knight on e7. Still, I'm a little worried about black's position here. Pawn takes, for example, pawn takes c5, rook f5 attacking the knight.
Rook to e6.
Yeah, I guess you do have the time to consolidate. You can see how black's pieces are more or less coming together for the defense. It was a tempo thing. It's just a one-tempo position in which if you don't grab that initiative immediately with the move knight b7, yes, it's available next move, but it's nowhere near as dangerous.
And by the way, even more crafty maybe, instead of rook to e6, to just simply go f6.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. The rook is actually doing a tremendous job
stopping
defending.
the knight from coming back into play with knight a5. Your knight is trapped right now.
It's funny how bad this knight has been the entire game, right? So it makes sense, like the one moment you had to really activate it as powerfully as Hans had here after the move c5, that was the key, that was the stroke that he needed to really ruin black's position. But he missed it, and just on time the move rook
He played
cf1.
fast, by the way, I think. Let's see.
Yeah, there.
From 16 minutes to 15 and 45 seconds. So he only thought they were gaining an additional 30 seconds per move. He only thought for less than a minute.
A strange decision to me, because Ray is the one that's in time pressure, as usual, of course, him being Ray Robson, being in time pressure every single game. He only has 6 minutes left for, still 7-8 moves to reach time control. And it seemed like a more experienced player, of course, Hans, very, very young, would have sat down here and tried to figure out how to create the most amount of complications. But currently, the way that he did it, it doesn't seem like it poses the most amount of trouble. I'm still a little worried about black's position, I'm not going to lie, but it will all boil down to the next couple of moves, because if he doesn't find a big initiative, as you mentioned, Cristian, this knight on b7 is stranded. It would have to go back to a5. The powers between the knights are quite obvious. And remember, black does have these powerful central pawns. If in some case down the road I'm able to push them forward, it is a long-term strategical advantage. Of course, it's difficult to imagine doing so right now with the knight on, with the queen on d5 and the doubled rooks on the f file, but those can be traded off at some point. You still have to be careful.
And Alejandro, I've been looking at the position a little bit with the engine, and in fact, white is still completely dominating this game. After the move rook to a6, I believe we do have this position on the board. Knight to b7 finally was played by Hans. I don't think Ray has played rook a6 yet, but
no,
it seems like this
he just
might
did
be.
It. He just played
rook to a6. And now, most likely, we're going to see a continuation of the
course.
assault on the pawn on d6 with a move rook to f6. I'm not going to take on c5. I'm not going to allow this rook to become active and become a tremendous defensive piece supporting this move f6. I'm going to put my rook on f6. And now it's completely over because I have so many threats. Not only that this d6 pawn is hanging, but I also have the idea of knight takes c5. Now we see the weakness of the rook on a6. This rook on f6 pins the pawn on d6. You're not going to be able to recapture with the pawn. The rook on a6 is going to be lost. So if Hans finds this move, rook to f6, well, it seems like it's all she wrote.
I like that concept, that it's not releasing the tension. We talk a lot about this a lot in chess, this concept of if you have two pawns that are in tension, you should only capture your opponent's pawn if it brings you an immediate benefit. And the reason that we are so attracted in this position after rook a6 to take on c5 is because it destabilizes this knight on e5. So you want that benefit to destabilize the knight, but unfortunately, I don't have enough pieces after rook f5 to really take advantage of it. So reverse the equation, put the rook on f6 first. I even think the move rook f5 first might also be very dangerous. But rook f6, the moment you spot it, is very compelling. Everything is coming crashing down on the 6th rank. Yeah, the knight on b7 joins the fray successfully. Knight takes d6 is a huge threat. Pawn takes c5 is a huge threat. Black has no activity. This looks like it will be the second decisive game of the day. A nice victory by Hans Niemann. He's had a tremendous year, and certainly he is proving why. New haircut over there.
He is surging, yes, and he does have a new haircut. I went upstairs, yeah, and I tried to kind of get a feeling of how these players are feeling, what the tension feels like in the playing hall, and I could barely recognize Hans.
I actually didn't recognize him at all. I will be honest, I went upstairs and I thought, who is this?
Who is this guy?
I came downstairs. He did have all this like bunch of curls the way I do, and it was very difficult to recognize him at all.
He looked at the camera. Maybe he knows that we're talking about him.
Yeah, well, he knows, right? He feels it's his chance. He has this move rook f6. He has the move rook f5. He's trying to figure out which one is stronger, but he certainly has that intuitive sense that something is off about black's position and he could take advantage of it. Well, let's let Hans Niemann think here in this position, as we do have a special guest with us in the studio, somebody that certainly follows all of these tournaments quite closely. We have a Grandmaster, Fabiano Caruana.
Thank you, Alejandro. Yes, we are indeed with Grandmaster Fabiano Caruana, one of the best chess players on the planet. Fabi, welcome back to St. Louis. Tell us a little bit about your last few months.
Yeah, I've been out of town for a while, so it's pretty much my third day back in St. Louis, and in time for this tournament, it's good to see that chess is coming back to over the board, and there's more and more events, and this is an incredibly strong tournament. Actually, I was surprised to see just how many really strong players there are.
Tell us a little bit about that. Back when you were 25, 2600, did you have this type of opportunities of closed events competing against the best chess players around your rating?
No.
Or where were those opportunities?
It was mostly open events that I played when I was around that level, even up to 2700. Mostly open tournaments. I played a lot of tournaments in Spain. I had like some closed tournaments. There was this, I think they still exist, this series of tournaments that went every month in Hungary called
the First
Saturday tournaments, right? They were closed events, but not nearly at this level. they were maybe between 23 to 2,500, most players, so maybe average rating 2,400. This level of tournaments, like average of 26, many players 2,650, even close to 2,700, is actually incredibly rare. Traditionally you had those open tournaments and then the super tournaments.
Super elite events.
Yeah, which are 2,750 plus, let's say. So this is actually a somewhat neglected area in chess. Players of this level, they're professionals, they're very strong, but they somewhat get overlooked in terms of opportunities of being able to play and improve, because these are the type of events which help these players improve their chess.
We are very happy to see the classics return to the St. Louis Chess Club. You were mentioning that there's a lot of talent in these two fields. Which player caught your eyes?
It's hard to say, because a lot of players I know pretty well. I've played a lot of them many times. Like a lot are quite established. Like, let's say Jeffrey is one of the top players in the United States. He's a very established player. And Savion was tied for first in the last U.S. championship and didn't win in the playoff, but still he's incredibly strong too. Hans Niemann is a slightly newer name. I got a chance to see his games more recently. He's obviously very talented, and I suspect he'll at some point make that push to 2,700, but he's not quite as established as some of the other guys. But yeah, there's a lot of.
Well, he was 2,500 last year.
Yeah, so. He's moving super fast up the ranks. But yeah, there's a lot of very talented players. Some more up and coming. Some who are a bit more established in the scene.
Well, since we have you in the studio, we're going to have to take advantage of that and use you. What game should we go to?
Well, the game you have up is actually pretty interesting. I don't know if that's a live position.
That is the live position. Actually, Rook F6 was played. We can go forward a couple of moves. Let me bring it up just 1 second. Lost it somehow. Not this one. This one is over. Why can't I find it? I'm pulling a
That one is
Yasser
a
here.
very interesting one as
That one is
well.
interesting as well, but I'm missing the Hans Niemann game for some reason from my... If you can pull it up, Cristian, for a second.
Absolutely, yes. So we do have this position right now on the board. I think Queen to E7 was played. By the way, it seems like maybe the only way to defend this position was to spot this ridiculous tactic with Rook to A7, and if you go Knight to B7, now I have this move Knight to F3.
Oh.
Rook to A7 is a really weird move, because it leaves
Good luck finding
D6
that.
hanging. It's not even Knight B7, but it just leaves D6 hanging, which I guess Rook Knight D3 is such an important resource, because once Black's Queen gets to E3, he has so many checks. Yeah, or Rook F7, Queen E3, suddenly we're already
It seems
looking
some
at
sort of
maybe even Queen E6 here or something.
Queen E6. Okay.
So it's this is probably okay, but yeah, Rook A7 is a really surprising move.
So, actually, Rook A7 probably was missed by both players, because we did see Hans very confidently, very quickly play this move, Rook C F1, probably not spotting Rook A7. If that's the only defense, you can completely understand why he thought he was in the driver's seat. The move Queen E7, trying to solidify the entire game. It came down, but it's just not enough. Knight B7, Rook A6, Rook F6 on the board, and Ray down to 2.5 minutes for the remaining 7 moves. That's going to be a very tall order, but objectively, this position might just be completely lost.
Yeah, he might try to maybe, because he has to defend D6. Once that falls, it's all over. And if he plays, he took on B4, but now Knight D6.
Let's take a look. Knight takes D6.
Because it also threatens, well, the Rook, then pawn F7, even somewhere Queen E5 could be in it. Although you have to be careful there, because then Black's pawns in the endgame could get rolling.
So what if I just simply go Rook to D8 now?
Rook to D8.
Here I think I do take on, let's point out that if I take on E5, there's also the important fact that after the move King G7, this Rook's actually under attack.
After Rook to D8, yeah, this one is not what White wants. After Rook to D8, maybe Knight F7, in fact. Because
Knight F7 check.
Black should play Knight takes F7.
Right.
Now I'll take with the Rook.
Here?
Yeah, you probably want to trade queens, otherwise you'll get mated. So Rook D5, Rook E7, and you pick up B4, like Rook D8 is forced. You pick up B4, you're just up 2 pawns, and Rook F7 is coming.
Yeah,
so this might clean it up very comfortably.
That is resigns.
But there's likely also other ways to finish it off.
So let's see, if he goes Knight takes D6, how does Black defend at this point?
He might not, right?
Yeah.
That's the only thing.
Maybe rook takes d6 and just say, okay, I'm going to give you the exchange and potentially take on a3, and maybe I'll do something with those two connected passers.
This is probably the right way, but after b takes a3, rook d6, b a3, queen d4, you, well, your pawns are not moving so quickly.
So let's go. If
A2
I go
maybe?
a2, you go rook a6.
Yeah,
right?
probably just rook a6.
Yeah, this catches
I think
the
white keeps
spawn,
control
right?
here very well. There's still rook d8 and there's some mess, but you know, unless black is promoting that pawn, it's going to be winning for white.
Can try for some rook c2 business? No, probably too slow, right?
Rook c2, maybe, can I play rook f7? I don't want to.
Yeah, this is a bit of a disaster, right? That's all sure. Let me just put this on the board. That here, I'm going to follow it up with rook a8. That's a back rank. No matter if you go to king g8 or queen g7, you're going to lose the game. Because
Well, actually, let's keep going. Queen to f8. Ah, you have queen to g5. Yeah.
Yeah,
here,
don't-
queen g5,
Queen g5
is
is
probably
game
the
over.
easiest.
Just don't take the queen immediately, then you might have
Yeah.
might have ruined it. Yeah,
Yes.
but this wins the queen.
And that's
Yeah.
it. Yeah, that's game over.
How much time does Hans have?
Hans still has 6 minutes to figure out what's going on in the position, 6 minutes and 10 seconds. So he does have the time to think about things. And as we mentioned, it's not necessarily the only way to increase the advantage. I'm also wondering if you could just take back the pawn on b4. It's probably not the cleanest, but it does ask some...
So if you take on b4, my guess is that he just simply wants to go maybe rook a1, some sort of tactics like that.
k1. Of course, using the fact that the rook is overloaded, defending the first rank, and the rook on f6. You know, I start looking at this, I think maybe I'm winning anyway, but why go into it, right?
It starts to get messy. I mean, maybe you can still play rook a1, queen f6, and knight d6. And then black has to play knight to f3 check, because there's queen e5 tactics.
Yes.
So knight f3, king h1. And it's hard to say, because white's king is also potentially in a mating net, you know, after like rook c2. On the other hand, maybe white wins after rook a8. But yeah, it gets very tricky. This is how you...
This is how you don't win.
Because knight e8, king g6, and the king, or even king h6, and the king has no more, white can't give any more checks to the king, and black actually wins this, I think.
That's checkmate.
That's difficult to stop checkmate. So yeah, this is how you potentially spoil winning positions.
You still have rook to a2, but you're
yeah,
probably going to get checkmated after
yeah,
rook
rook
to
a2,
c1.
rook. Well, your king on f2 is maybe safe.
Here, although even the move queen c6 looks...
Or queen c6, yeah.
Queen
Or
C6.
queen g5, it's hard to say, yeah. Queen g5 allows queen a6, so...
Queen c6 seems very potent.
Yeah, but we don't expect any of this. I think the moment you start to see that it gets messy, you just switch to the other variation. Remember that Hans doesn't have that much time himself. Now currently only at 4 minutes and 15 seconds. He does have to make a decision that will give him the cleanest way to win this game.
Well, he's quite a good blitz player. I think he sort of specializes in fast time controls because he's so... I've seen him play so much online chess, so he's probably not too worried about the lack of time here. But you never know. I mean, even the best players can panic when they're low on time and blunder. I mean, especially here, it's easy to blunder, easy to miss some small tactic, and the entire evaluation reverses itself.
I think we're going to stay here for a little bit as it is the most exciting game and both players going down to the wire. Hans keeps burning time, certainly making his fans nervous. What is there else to think? Knight takes d6, 8 takes b4 seem like the only choices to me.
It feels like that is the critical line that he's calculating, just that exchange
And he just took
sacrifice.
back.
He played it.
He just took back. He didn't play with knight
No.
takes d6. We didn't really see the exact problem with knight takes d6. We thought it was winning. And after pawn takes b4, Ray, man, he's a crafty player. I've had the terrible experience of playing Ray Robson when he's in time control. And it's just like he finds every resource to keep himself afloat. Doesn't matter that he's down to 30 seconds. And let's see if he finds the move
Speaking
rook
of
A1.
resources, Alejandro, we were mentioning the move rook to c1, but check this line out. Rook to c2.
Rook c2 immediately.
Now, the big threat is that if you take on d6 with the knight, I'm actually going to be able to take on f6 with the queen.
Very tricky.
Check
very,
that
very, very
checkmate
tricky.
out.
Let's show it on the board. We got check here. This is a back rank check except for the rook. But this knight f3 kicks out the king, and then I'll have a pleasant choice between rook takes f1 or rook takes h2 checkmate. That is not going to be good. Rook c1. Or rook c2.
Both of them
crafty
work.
move.
Rook to c1 and rook to c2. Both
We were
of
mentioning
them-
rook to a1.
He played rook to c2.
And he played rook c2. Oh man, I see rook c2 and I'm starting to get nervous.
So another question is, can white, if queen takes d4, then black will switch the idea and play, I think, rook to a2, because that's the second idea of rook c2. Even if the a1 square is covered, black still has this very dangerous looking. Like, let's say, maybe white still has rook 6 to f2, but...
Wait, do I have a...
No, there's a
Maybe
pin.
king to
Oh, yes, yes.
g8.
But
Pin
queen
there.
queen to f6 is actually maybe nice here.
That's a nice move.
That's a brilliant move. Let's just explain it to the viewers. Rook takes f6 cannot be played because check, check. The other rook will come with checkmate to g2. And if you take my rook, this comes crashing down. Knight f3 check. I'll take the queen with check on the next move as well. And yeah, this looks...
This is not, I mean,
Actually,
there's still
not
king
the end,
h1.
right?
Yeah,
King h1, knight...
But we're already talking about black trying to win rather than white trying to win.
Yes, absolutely. Especially, as always, with this terrible knight
Yeah.
on b7, this endgame looks more promising for black than for white after I take on d3. Yes.
So yeah, now we could see any result. They're both low on time.
And
Well,
they still have 6 moves to make. So
6 moves to make. It's not easy.
It's going to get tense.
Easy for white to lose this one as well.
Absolutely. So if not rook 6 f2, what else do we have in store here for white? We saw knight takes d6 loses to queen takes f6. I think that is pretty clear, right?
Well, there's rook takes d6.
Rook takes d6.
But in rook a2, it doesn't really solve this issue because rook d8, king g7 is, yeah, it's not leading anywhere.
Yeah.
White
As usual, if the knight could teleport to f5,
Yeah.
but this knight has been out of play for so long. All right, rook takes d6 doesn't quite work.
Well, one thing I can do is maybe just plug that a5 with the move knight to a5.
Oh.
Just not allow your rook to get to double up on the second rank.
Yeah, that's a nice move.
That is a very nice move. The knight from useless to hero, making sure that the rook doesn't penetrate either on a1 or a2.
But now there's no more threat. There's no more rook takes d6 coming. My knight on e5 is stable.
That's funny.
There's queen d4.
Queen d4 is a
Yeah,
threat,
Queen
right?
d4. So maybe I have to try to, and I think he's going for it.
I think, yeah, there's nothing else on that side of the board, right?
I don't think so.
I also don't see another option. Once you see the rook 6f2 might run into problems, knight a5, yeah, I think it has to be knight a5.
And he's down to his last minute.
It's also knight a5 is a sort of move which kind of negates the possibility that you lose because white seems relatively safe there. While if you allow the other rook into the attack with rook a2 or rook a1 potentially, then you're very much risking losing the game. So knight a5, and it also, besides queen e4, it also threatens queen b5, which is an important pawn as well.
Oh,
What?
but he's actually changed his mind. He was reaching for the knight, but he did go with the move rook 6f2. Will Ray, who is known on his chess.com puzzle sprees as Spicy Caterpillar, one of the best puzzle rush solvers in the world, will he spot the move queen f6?
No, it wasn't here. It was queen d4, rook a2, rook 6f2, queen f6.
We need the rooks doubled
Ah, we need the
first.
rooks
yeah.
double first. Sorry, my
So
bad.
maybe
So he's
rook
actually playing
a2.
here before.
Maybe rook a2. Maybe that's a good question. What do you do after rook a2?
But then rook c2 and knight d6, I don't see the attack anymore.
Let's put that on the board
There's
here.
no more queen to
Takes,
f6.
takes, queen takes d6, and
And now there's queen e5 on tap, so...
yeah, this does look pretty bad. And queen a8, knight
Maybe,
f5.
I mean,
also.
black can just take on f2. That looks the most reasonable option. Because then you'll get your other rook in potentially with check. White has to take with the rook.
And he took it. We see that exchange happening right now.
All right, rook a1 looks like a move, certainly.
Yeah, now it's so concrete.
How does this proceed? Rook a1 check for sure, right?
Okay,
I don't know
that's-
I
about
don't know for sure. King g2. I would really like to take knight d3 or knight g4, but they both run into queen.
Well, what if I
d4?
take on d3 first?
Oh, let's start with knight takes d3. You're
Right.
saying?
Yeah, what about rook f7 here? I was wondering.
That is the big question. Do I have enough checks to create any sort of danger for your king? So let's say check.
Yeah, king g2.
Check again with... Oh, rook a2 doesn't work.
Because
Look.
the queen is defending.
Actually, maybe it does work.
Huh?
Maybe it does
yeah,
work.
queen e4.
Rook
King
f-
h3. No, rook f3 runs into knight e1.
Knight
but
e1. Let's put that out. Even this is not the end of the variation, right? You give this check. You'd like to block with the rook, but knight e1 check picks at least some material up. You
Well,
were
king to h3, I think,
but
finishes.
no
the game.
checks,
this,
yeah.
this is actually surprisingly no checks. The queen defends e6, the rook defends f5, the knight doesn't have access to these squares, and that would be the end of the game.
So wait, instead of rook a2, black must have something better. So yeah, rook a1 check, king g2.
Robson down to his last 45 seconds.
Problem is you actually don't have many viable moves because, well, there's too many threats, queen d4 and rook f8 potentially.
And by the way, I think he played the best move in the position. He played king to g8.
Ah, yeah.
Wow. I like this. Every time that queen takes d4, it never pins the knight. You cannot take on d4, of course, right now because queen takes b7 is on tap. So
So you have to lose a tempo with knight a5.
But this threatens knight d3 now. That's why he defended both d4 and, well, defended f7 and indirectly defended d4 because it's no longer checked. So knight a5 allows knight d3, and black is, yeah, I don't know what the valuation is, but it suddenly looks a lot safer. Black can even just move the knight back to e5 next and
well, I can even start thinking of this move. Of course,
yeah, I was thinking
queen
like
takes
rook
d5,
c2,
but yeah.
rook c2 is kind of
or maybe
natural.
knight c6, right?
And then knight e5, I thought.
Knight e5 just to defend. Here on c6 doesn't allow the knight in.
Because okay, you can take b5, but then you have to deal with that potentially that passed d pawn. Maybe not immediately, but maybe queen to a7 and then d3 with check, and it's very double-edged.
It's still a 3-result game here.
Yeah, for sure. White is risking as well.
So what if we go maybe knight c6 after knight takes d3? So knight to a5, knight takes d3, knight c6.
And if take on f2, black is
Probably
up a
just a
pawn.
draw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a riskless position. I don't know
Yeah.
how often I
Queen-
win it, but I think I win
No,
it.
maybe queen g5 even.
Oh, queen e5.
Oh, queen g5 much stronger. Yeah, the same idea, defend the pawn on b5, but
And-
instead of defending the pawn passively with queen e5, you have this queen e3, massive threat.
Yeah,
This
it's
looks
either
lost.
a draw or black
Black is
presses
playing
for a
for two
win.
results.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see what happened. Knight a5 on the board. Indeed, we are expecting the move knight takes d3. We don't really see anything wrong with it, and a pawn is a pawn. It's a pretty good pawn, too.
Yeah, it's an automatic move, I think.
Right, and it's been played. Knight takes d3. Question is, what does Hans have planned here?
Is queen to b5 a move, or?
Queen b5 might be a move.
I mean, the thing is, yeah, black is no longer worse for sure after knight f2, queen a6, but is he better? Is hard to say. It might be kind of drawish eventually.
knight
Because
takes-
white has queen c8, queen g, all sorts of checks. And, okay, white's king is weak, but so is black's.
Yeah, queen b5 might be interesting. You actually played your first instinct of the move, knight takes d3, rook c2, bringing the rook into the game. It doesn't feel like it has any decisive threats right now, but it is very logical to try to harass this king with the move rook c8.
So the idea being that if you take on b4, I'm just simply going to pick up all your pieces after rook to c8.
But you can
queen
do this
d4.
actually, because you have queen e5,
Okay.
and then queen
Queen
a1.
a1.
And then the question is which king is weaker? Because king g2, rook a5. And if queen d6, there's rook a2 and queen f1, and
It feels
Might
like
get checkmated.
it feels like black gets here faster.
it's a bit difficult to say because queen
Check.
f1, king g4. But yeah, queen
H5?
e2. Yeah, it feels like it should be checkmate.
h5 you go king g4.
No, but then
No,
f6.
f6, right?
F6,
This is
yeah.
just checkmate. Here, f6, king takes. You have to go to the h file, and then
Or
this
queen,
actually
queen
H3.
f3. Or well, queen h3 is made in one.
Queen h3, yeah.
whatever.
That's
I mean,
If you go king to h4, now you go rook,
Rook
takes
h2, yes.
Yeah.
all right. So rook c2 on the board. What is the time situation right now? I see 6 seconds for Ray Robson.
And he played knight e5. He did not take the pawn on b4.
All right. This is, I think, a more practical approach when you're running out of time.
also because knight b4 allowed rook c8 and queen b5. And black's pieces are extremely... The knight on e5 is just perfect. The knight on b4...
I love this knight. I love this knight. And look at that expression. Rook c8 check. Finally, an easy move here for Ray Robson. King g7 played immediately. And I think you have to take this pawn, right? I don't see... oh,
Yeah,
wait.
or queen b5. It's
He took it.
He took on d4, right? Taking advantage of
but
the
queen
renewed
b5.
pin.
You know, you also have to be worried that you just black sacks that rook, like queen g5, and just mates.
Or
without,
queen g5,
without the
right?
rook, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So taking on d4, at least you pin the knight. You're kind of happy about that.
So let's unpin the knight with queen f6.
Yeah, and maybe maybe queen f2.
Although even here I
But
can
now I can
claim,
just simply take and go knight d3.
right?
and
That's
pick
an
up-
extra
yeah,
pawn,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. No,
Become
that's
the pawn on
actually
d3.
probably a winning endgame.
Right, picks up that one. That's kind of ugly.
So yeah, maybe king g2 after queen f6.
Really?
Yeah, at least like to give a check, you have to repin your knight with black. So king g1.
But you're.
But yeah, it's
so king h3, queen g4 just loses the rook.
yeah.
Important to point that out.
Yeah,
But this looks so risky for white.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the move king g2. But maybe you have to do it, right? What else can you do here?
You have like queen c3. You have a bunch of moves, but none of them look super appealing.
Queen f6 was played.
Yeah, so we're going to find out. I think this is the last.
Yes, they made time control.
They made time control,
Ray
right?
Robson is out. He is going to the restroom, splash some water into on his face. Just take a breather.
Wow, what a time scramble we had, but it did seem like both players avoiding the riskier situations. I can imagine why, as some of them just ended up absolutely lost for both sides. But here, after the move queen d4, queen f6, instinctively I like black. It just feels that the knight on a5 is so far away from the action. I understand that it's blocking my own rook, but if I can ever get it into the game, that's just going to be all she wrote. The knight on e5 is such a monster.
Yeah, this is fully a 2-result game. Queen c3, queen e3. Yeah, white is probably not losing or anything yet, but it could become losing at some point.
Well, we've dedicated enough time to this game. They have reached time control, of course, after this event. Hans will probably take a long time to consider his options, make sure that he defends appropriately. Cristian, do you have any updates, any games that you want to see that we haven't really been able to look at?
Well, first of all, I think it's also time to release our
yeah.
prisoner, Fabiano. Thank you, Fabiano, for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again in the studio.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Thank you, Fabi. And let me then take control. Let's go around the horn a little bit on what we have left here in round number 1. We actually have a bunch of games left. Surprisingly, I only see 2 results so far, and we've already mentioned them. Chris Repka did beat JJ Ali Marandi. Meanwhile, Ilya Nishnik drew against Sam Savion on Group A. So let's go around the horn real quick to see what is going on in this game between Arman Mikhailian and Sam Hanin. It looks like black is fully in control. They both made move 40, they're move 41, but maybe I'm overestimating here black's position a little bit.
That looks so close to the endgame between
Right,
Hungaski and Christopher Yu.
That's
Almost the same structure.
Almost the same structure, right? But the knight is much better placed on c4. You're not down a pawn. And after the move king c3, you do have tactics like knight takes a5. It's not so clear when they work, but I think that white should have enough not to be worse in this position. I still take black.
Absolutely.
I still think black is preference here. Let's continue down the board. We have a fantastic material imbalance in the game between Elshan Moriarty and Harshit Raja. We have 2 rooks for black and 2 bishops. But white has not only the queen and the 2 knights, but also those passed pawns on b4 and a5. I don't even know how to start evaluating this one. Why did we release Fabi? What is this?
Well, it does seem like white definitely is in pole position to score a victory right now.
This is pawns, right?
Those pawns look so threatening. Now, you have to be very careful because if I manage somehow to open up one of the bishops, then your king gets checkmated.
Yeah, this is a big issue, right?
If I manage to get the other rook on the first rank and start attacking the pawn on h2, the king gets checkmated.
Yeah.
So you have to be extremely crafty with white to block all of these opportunities for black. I see maybe an idea of just simply playing the move knight to e3, retreating with the knight to e2, sorry.
Yep.
Retreating with the knight, covering up this penetration of the e file, but also defending the pawn on d4. And then I'm going to find a configuration to play knight to b3, defend the pawn on a5, and then start pushing the pawns.
I like it. It also tries to kick out that rook. Knight c5 might be a good move. And I do wonder if at some point I'm okay with giving up the queen and the knight for the 2 rooks, because these bishops, they're not great as long for stopping the pawns. The knight will do a great job pushing both of them. It's still a wild game. I do agree with you. My initial impression is it's a chaotic game. My second impression, I think this one is solidly in white's hand with proper play. Again, both players have reached time control, and he didn't like the move 92, but he did play another solid move, the move 93. Sorry, knight f1, trying to go to e3, putting pressure on this pawn on f5. Yeah, this looks very bad for white. Let's continue. Games that I haven't been able to see. Abhimanyu Mishra is playing against Titus Stramavicius, and this one looks like a draw. It doesn't matter how much white tries. All black really needs to do is keep the bishop on this diagonal and defend this pawn on f7. You cannot kick out the king from g7. This should be just a very basic draw.
It is, it is. Even with an extra pawn on the f-file for white, that one is probably winning for white, but it's not easy.
And it's not always. It's not always winning. Yes, absolutely correct. So we're going to let this one go because it's definitely a draw. We saw
I think
the Hans
one
Niemann
that is
game.
very close to being done, and maybe we can jump to that one, is the clash between Jeffrey Shong, the rating favorite of the A group, and Mikhail Antipov, because that one is about to finish.
Yeah, we had seen the game back here after, where did we leave it here? Here, Antipov played knight d7, and it seems that the pair of bishops eventually proved to be too much. Well, that's a very cute tactic, simplifying the position. And a transformation of advantages, the king is still very weak. f6 is going to be a checkmating threat in many variations, but you don't even have to calculate him. The rook is taking on c5. Black is still very,
and that
very,
was a
very,
resignation.
Yeah, it looks like red. And that is resignation.
It was a
right
resignation,
there.
yeah.
Let's go real quick on how they got to the final position. Jeffrey scores his first victory of the tournament, giving away the pawn, trying to get one back on f5, but none of this is quite enough. That's too many passed pawns on the queen side for Jeffrey, who scores a very clean victory with a small idea in the Scotch game and taking it home without any real problems. The last move, rook f7 check, just seals the deal. And a very nice game here by one of the top American players.
A typical Jeffrey win.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just gets a slight advantage out of the opening, knows the positions better than his opponent, and squeezes a victory out of that.
Yeah. Let's continue with the game of Camille Dragoon and Dario Scherz. This one, another material imbalance. As you can see, black has a queen against the two rooks, but I'm trying to count the pawns. And I think black has 2 pawns. Am I counting that right?
Black has 2 extra pawns.
Black has 2 extra pawns for that material imbalance. If this rook could join the fray, that'd be it. This king is getting checkmated, but I'm not really sure how this rook is ever going to join the fray, to be quite honest with you. You can always go rook check, but I don't
that's the question,
think it's more than a perpetual.
Let's go to that. So king to h7 is the only move. You cannot go king to f7 because rook f8 would win the queen and win the game.
Yes.
So after king h7, let's just continue with this perpetual rook to e7, right? Perpetual attempt. And you were mentioning that it's very difficult to find a way for that rook to get rerouted. Now, the question is, can black play for more after knight to f7? Because this is just a draw, right?
I would be very scared as black to be
because
in this position.
rook to e3.
Rook e3.
And finally the rook comes into
the
play.
attack.
You
Yeah,
don't
I don't
have
want to
queen
do
to
that.
f4.
Very important. This knight is actually gorgeous. Not only does it attack, but it also defends a very critical point of white's position, which is the f4 square. Is the only check that black has here.
But it's not over. Even in that position, it's not over.
Really?
Because you have queen to f6.
Oh, always resourceful, huh?
So rook to e8, right, seems to be the only move.
Let me think.
Unless
about
I'm
this
missing
one.
something.
No, I don't see much. I don't see a big advantage of throwing in this check.
No, actually you can do that.
Huh? King g7.
King to g7, and now we're going to make a draw, right?
Yeah,
knight
but
to e6.
I think that after the move knight f7, I'm looking for more.
Who's playing for a victory is the
I
question.
have the feeling it's white, but it also wouldn't surprise me that black has quite enough. I'm a little scared about this move rook e8. Rook e8 and interposing with knight f7. I think that black is the one that should rein in the position and just admit a draw. As we do see the players repeating at least once. They have already made time control, so that's not much of an issue. King h7, rook e7 on the board. And Darius stops and thinks, do I want to consider the move knight f7, which I believe to be slightly crazy, but that's how my students play chess, or play the same move, king g8. And he has reached time control, so of course he'll take his time thinking about this one. I do expect the move king g8 to be played. I don't think that it's white that's risking anything, but before we get too much into that, we do have one of the winners of today's round, Jeffrey Shong, with a very, very clean game against Mikhail Antipov.
Thank you, Alejandro. Yes, we are here with one of the young stars of American chess, Jeffrey Shong, after a very smooth victory. Jeffrey, tell us a little bit, how does it feel to be back over the board here in St. Louis?
Yeah, I guess it's been a while, especially for me personally. My last event was the Grand Swiss in Riga back in November. So yeah, it's been a while, just good to be back, really enjoying the weather so far. So yeah.
Tell us a little bit about this game. It felt like your typical victory. You just got a nice advantage out of the opening with a crafty idea in this Scottish game. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, actually, I wasn't sure how I handled this. So I guess we can
On this one.
go back. Okay. Yeah. So okay. Yeah, you can keep going here.
He was spending a lot of time. Were you surprised by that?
A bit. Okay, I saw that he had a couple of Boots games in this line, but yeah, I mean, I was a little bit surprised, I guess. Yeah.
Where do you think his real mistake came?
So yeah, I think. By the way, I was wondering actually if he takes on f3 first. Maybe this is a better version, like takes and bishop d4.
Were you out of your opening preparation at this point?
You
don't have to answer that much.
Yeah, kind of, but I had some ideas, but maybe not in this exact position. So, yeah, okay, bishop. The point is, yeah, if I long castle bishop e5, I think maybe this is what he wanted to get in the game.
Right. And let's point out why you cannot greedily.
Yeah, here, okay, this is actually probably playable, but knight d5, maybe it's.
Right, the idea, you hang the knight, but remember that this bishop is now targeting g7, and that would trap a full rook, not just an exchange. So, well, probably, right? I don't think the bishop gets trapped. Complicated.
No.
So, black would play here.
No, probably you have to take, right? You have to take on d5, bishop takes g7.
Could play f6, but that's pretty ugly. All right, f6.
Yeah, definitely not crystal clear, but
Problem is the rook cannot go to g1.
Yeah, this is a big issue. I was
there.
mentally readying myself to put something on the g7 square, but you can't actually access the g1
Maybe
square.
rook takes d5. Let's try to open up that diagonal and get with the rook to h5.
Messy.
I need to help that bishop somehow. It is definitely messy.
But at the end of the day, on the worst case scenario, white will have 2 pawns on the rook for 2 minor pieces. No way he's worse. Yeah. So bishop d4 was played immediately without the queen exchange, and it did feel that this endgame was just very unpleasant for the black side, and white's position more or less flowed.
yeah, I think so. But at some point, I feel like I made a slight inaccuracy. So if we continue on, so yeah, this. I think, yeah, knight d7 caught me by surprise because I was expecting, let's say, castle. And then my idea was bishop d3, say bishop d7 seems normal. And now I want this bishop a3 to threaten knight e2. And the bishop is kind of awkward. But he surprised me with knight d7. And I think I should just play king c1 because he freed up the d5 square for my knight. So
yeah, there's no knight on f6.
I think king c1 would have been simply better. But now bishop a3, I don't like this because now, I force him to take on c3. But here he made a mistake. So I think if he just castles, it's not so bad for him.
All right. Maybe even a solid move like f6, I'm wondering.
Yeah, f6 maybe, but I don't think it's quite necessary. Maybe just castles rook e8 and so on.
Right. So
Because, yeah, if I don't get the idea in the game.
And the idea of the game was knight e5, you played f4, knight c6 and e5, and it just seems like the position is blowing up without any real development from black.
Yeah, I was expecting, so yeah, knight d4, king b2. I thought he was going to try bishop e6, so that he can meet c3 with knight takes b3. Yeah, and this is, okay, he's probably doing well here.
It's probably just a draw, right?
Well,
Actually,
he will move the rook somewhere else. Yeah.
And then somewhere else. And Actually, even that
It's not over.
It's
Yeah.
not so clear, yeah? Because you do have bishop b5 check at the end.
Ah, okay.
Picks up the
But
rook.
yeah, it wasn't really what I wanted.
And now
So-
probably king e7 and followed by rook b8, and you can resign.
So bishop e6.
But yeah,
well,
I think
sorry.
the key idea here after bishop e6 is king c1. So preparing c3 again.
This is very crafty, right? You realize this went here, here.
Yeah, yeah, it's a funny yeah, diamond kind of. But yeah, now if he goes king e7, I guess I take him bishop b2. So it still should be good for me.
The bishops are roaring in this position, especially this dark squared one. Difficult to defend the diagonal. Yeah, this looks bad for black.
But actually in the game he found a good way to fight on, because at first I thought it's close to winning, but so yeah, let's continue here. He played king e7 instead.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, maybe I had something more precise, but I went for c3. Now knight e6, f5, knight f8. So actually, it looks really bad, but I wasn't sure how to break this.
Right. So you went rook e1,
Mm-hmm.
king d8, rook d1 repeated once, but after bishop d3, this looked, to our eyes, without any engines, pretty clear.
It's definitely better, but yeah, in this position, I think, yeah, after g4, I was more worried about rook b6 first.
Defending the weakness here on d6.
And then like h4, h6.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be, it's a better version of the game where he allowed tactics. So
Mhm.
here I think it's not so easy for me.
And we do have a result. That one is over between Moradiabadi and Raja. Moradiabadi managed to secure the victory.
Yeah, we're talking about that. Those pawns on the queen side will show the end of the game in a little bit. But let's finish this one up. 95 did surprise you, and let's just show the tactic in the game. Bishop takes c5, a distraction here for black. Of course, it's kind of nice. The knight takes d3 intermezzo. Doesn't quite work. So you have this move, rook d6 at the end, and the king is caught. It's not quite checkmate, but it is pretty bad, as you have to play bishop e6, losing the piece for free.
Yeah, I wanted to point out one more funny idea that I saw. So after h4,
Mm-hmm.
he can also try to take on d3 and rook b6. And then I thought rook d5, threatening mate, h6. And now I can still go c4, probably. And if, okay, bishop b7, I can move my king, for example.
And still the move, it's funny how this king is getting mated from every angle.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is actually pretty sad for black. And the position in the game, equally sad. This just is a lost endgame. We're pointing out the weaknesses on the queen side, no real development to help them out. A very clean victory, Jeffrey.
Thanks.
Congratulations, Jeffrey, and well, hopefully we're going to see you again here in the studio in the next few
Yeah,
rounds.
I hope so as well.
All right, let's take a look at the end of that game between Elshan Moriadebari and Raja Harshit. We did leave it in what initially looked like a complex position, but the more we delved into it, over by this position, that these pawns were just going to roll down the board, and indeed they did. Knight f1 was a nice move to reroute to e3. Cristian liked a knight e2, but I think it is just a choice of riches. Rook e4 looks a bit too desperate for my liking. Yes, you do remove one of the knights, but I don't actually see what it accomplishes, because the queen can stay on c4, and it does defend the pawn on d4, and the queen's coming here, and the queen is coming here, and yeah, this is absolutely
over.
falling apart for black.
It's such a tease to have those beautiful bishops,
Yeah.
but not be able to actually get them involved into the game, because that pawn on e4 blocking one of the bishops, the pawn on d4 nicely protected by the queen blocking the other bishop. This one is such a sad situation for white. But another sad situation for white is in the game between Hans Niemann and Ray Robson, the one that we were having our eyes on for a very long time. Hans was completely dominating throughout the middle game. But then he just allowed Robson back into the game, allowed himself to get back to those very critical last couple of minutes on the clock. And he just simply did not make the best decisions. And right now he's finding himself in a very difficult situation. We see this move, we left it off at move number 40 immediately as they reached the time control with this move queen to f6. And Fabiano also was saying that this is starting to become quite unpleasant for white because it all comes down to whose king is safer. And right now it seems like I have more pieces closer to your king as black. I'm ready to go knight to f3. Of course, that would close the match in one move. You have to defend against that. But the coordination between the queen and the knight against a naked king like this on g1, well, it's just extremely difficult to defend against. And we see that the pressure is on right now. We see this move, queen to e3, knight to c4, queen to d3, queen to a1 is not yet on the board. So this is the position right now that we have. Queen to d3 was played. Ray Robson, 23 minutes, calculating right now. How do I get to his king? Well, it seems like the most straightforward way to get there is with the move queen to a1. That makes a lot of sense, of course. You see a check, you give the check.
That's how we play chess. Maybe not Fabi, but that's how we play chess.
Of course, queen to a1. Well, what if he goes king to g2? Now you're going to continue giving checks, of course. We know you see a check, you give it. King to h3. And now, of course, you're not going to hurry up with capturing the pawn on b4 because this would be a huge mistake. It would allow the move queen to d4, which simply finishes the game in white's favor. You cannot block this diagonal with a move knight to e5 because the queen on b4 is hanging. Queen takes b4 would be a huge critical mistake. But what you can do is just simply reverse the order of the moves. You're actually going to block this diagonal first with the knight. Knight to e5. Now, wherever white is going to move the queen, I'm just simply going to take on b4, and actually the knight is ready to defend the king. We were mentioning in this game particularly, but earlier in the game, that the knights next to the king are extremely protective. And this is exactly what we see right now. If you try to do this, I can go d5 first of all, open up this file for the rook and potentially give a checkmate.
I was wondering why it didn't work last move. Maybe it's just
At what
stronger
point?
right now. d5 right here. King h3,
d5 immediately.
I want to play...
Now I have rook to c6. And the knight is not on e5 defending that square c6.
Computers are so clever.
Very crafty. Yeah. You have to be very careful with
and knight
the
e5,
order
queen
of
takes
the moves.
b5 actually works for white. Like rook c... No.
Knight e5,
No, d5 first?
Yes.
Because I was thinking d5, rook c6. What if I play knight e5 here? But somehow queen takes b5 keeps everything. Oh, queen takes
Precisely.
d5.
Queen takes d5. And now I'm just going to play this.
And the king is... Yeah, this becomes
Your
a lot.
position is still better as black, but I no longer have this knight protecting my king. My king is a bit weak, and it seems like it's enough compensation for the exchange.
Yeah, I can imagine the knight coming to d4 and f5, certainly. So continue the line. Knight e5 first. Very accurate. I like it. And then when you cannot play the rook to c6, the queen has to go somewhere.
So what if you take on b5, right? It seems like you're getting closer to the queen. That's a very critical question. Well, the problem is this knight coming to f3. I'm coordinating and getting ready to checkmate you.
That is
I'm
checkmate,
defending this g5 square.
That's a beautiful move.
This would be a checkmate in one move.
That's a beautiful move, knight f3.
But the knight on f3 protects that, and that just finishes the game. Let's see what happens if you take the rook. Where is the checkmate? Well, I'm just simply going to take king to g4. Knight goes back to e5, king to f4 or f5, queen to f2, king to g5, queen to f6 is probably a checkmate, h6, getting the queen on the h file, followed by queen to h2. That's also a checkmate. It just seems like, well, first of all, black has to see this. Black has to understand this, but he does have a lot of time to think about it. He's going to calculate. We know that Robson is a very, very good calculator. He spends his time wisely. And even when he gets in time pressure, as he did in this game, he's going to create problems for his opponent all the way until the end. And we see that Hans was just unable to keep the pace with the complications that were happening on the board.
Yeah, he's going to kick himself for missing that opportunity earlier of knight takes d6 instead of recapturing the pawn on b4. The engines, I did go back to see it, did give him a winning advantage. We were analyzing that variation with Fabiano Caruana. Let's go back into this position. A crucial problem here. After pawn takes b4, do you play the seemingly simple a takes b4, which allowed a surprising counterplay with the move rook c2, especially since the a file is now open for the rook, or do you go for the complications with knight takes d6? Hans made the wrong choice on this turn. Of course, the game wasn't over by any means after that, but it is clear that things went very wrong for him. Didn't really understand exactly where they went wrong. Probably this move queen e3, if I had to guess. Here, Fabiano was mentioning the details between queen c3 and queen e3, that you had to pick one of them, but he wasn't sure which one. And the more I look at it, the more I think the move queen c3 was more accurate, simply because you retained control over this long diagonal. And you can see how it's abandoning this diagonal with the move queen e3 that might bite hands back, because queen a1, queen b2, knight e5, this reconfiguration of black pieces looks very compelling. It looks very strong.
While we're at it, Alejandro, just play that move queen to c3.
Oh, yes? Queen c3.
I'll show you a very nice move. Rook to a8.
Sometimes I love computers. Sometimes, usually 99.9% of the time, I hate computers. Rook a8, beautiful move. Rook takes a8, not possible because knight f3 check, and then you pick up the queen. This must have been what kind of scared Hans away from this position. There, yeah, I start to see how this gets dangerous, right? Rook takes c8, knight d3 is a little bit of a threat. It just feels like everything becomes a little bit of a threat. Maybe the error came even earlier, it's hard to say. But before we delve into it, let us join our guest in the studio. He also won his game today, Elshan Moriarty, with a very nice victory.
Another victor after a very tense game is indeed here with us, Alejandro. Elshan, welcome to the studio. What a game! Take us a little bit through that, and take us a little bit about your feelings of returning to St. Louis and playing once again over the board chess.
Well, it was a very good feeling winning the first round. This is actually, now with this one, playing Spring Classics, I played all 4 seasons. So this is the first time for me, completed the seasons. So it feels good to be here playing chess, and I haven't played much in 2020, and nothing in 2020, and very few games in 2021. So it feels great to be here playing 1 game a day. It's always a great treat and pleasure being here. And this is the first time I also win my first round game, so couldn't be a better start, huh?
It feels like that was the reality for most of us, not playing too much chess in 2020 and 2021. But now we're back over at the board. Take us through this game, Elshan.
Okay, sure. Actually, it wasn't a very good game, but let's look at it.
Absolutely. Here it is up on the board.
Okay.
Take us to the critical position.
c4, e6. Well, I didn't expect bishop e7 actually, so I was out of my prep because he always plays almost exclusively c6 here. So I just, when I played bishop e7 relatively quickly, I just thought, okay, let's play old school chess. So I played bishop g5, castle, rook c1, so Karpov Kasparov stuff. And h6, bishop h4, b6, e3, takes f6, takes cd, ed. Yes. This goes back Karpov Spassky match 1973 or 74, semi-final of the World Championship. All right, so let's keep going this. And here, after this, I messed up. I think here I messed up. I played knight d2. I think I should go knight e1. Because if he goes f5, I can go f4 later and put the knight back on e5.
You're much faster.
Yeah, right. That's why I was worse after. I mean, I don't know if I have it right away, because he has queen e7 now, but if we did the right prep, I can go knight d3, f4, and d5. So because my plan is always bishop on f3, g3, bishop comes, and then knight d3, then I want to go back queen c2, b4, right? I mean, you guys know better than me. So I played actually this plan in was Raja Harshi born in 2005? I don't know. I'm the oldest player in the tournament.
He was pretty young, but he was definitely born.
Because I'm the oldest player in the whole tournament. I am the oldest player, so it feels very special. It's the first time I'm the oldest player in the whole hall.
And you were mentioning that on one of your posts on Facebook.
Yeah, yeah. This is the first time I am the oldest player.
How does that feel?
It feels odd.
Let's remember, you're still quite young. You're still
yeah,
very young person.
Player. So when I play Opimania, I'm 3 times his age when I play Opimania. It's like 3 times his age.
Yeah, but where's the 3 times the rating, right?
Yeah. I think we get that there too. So you want to go back to the game? Or?
Let's go back to the game.
Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, I think now I'm probably screwed up. If you run engine, I'm probably slightly worse here already. So I just try to muster up something, g3, this, bishop d3, g5, and I was very happy of seeing this move. That was not a good move, I was sure, because after this move, rook e1, g5, now queen c2 doesn't have queen g6 because of g4. I think he missed g4 here.
That's
Because if I go
nicely
f4, he would play queen g6 there, and then instead of queen c2, if I play f4, he has queen g6, and now he has g takes f4.
Now
So
you
you
have
don't
to
have
go
time
king
for
to
knight f3.
h1, and that
I'll lose a
loses
tempo
some
here, yeah,
tempos.
Yeah, because of this problem, right? Where you're taking
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's a pin. Okay.
So queen c2 and queen e6, then I play f4, so I thought, okay, probably I equalized here now. g4, because he has to go g4, otherwise knight is coming back.
The difference of a tempo, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he has to go g4. Oh, this is bad? Okay. Then I play a3.
Actually, if I remember correctly, I was checking this position with the engine. The engine's moves was h3.
Did
you consider that?
Yeah, I considered h3 takes, knight f3, right? Is that
I don't remember what the computer
rook
was saying.
g8, and I wasn't sure what to do here because queen f3 takes rook g3.
Maybe king to h2. What's the
Then
problem?
knight f6.
Knight to f6 is coming with tempo. Knight to g4. Oh my goodness.
I wasn't
But
so
wait,
sure.
bishop takes f5.
f5. No, sorry. He doesn't play right away. He goes rook a f8 first, and then knight f6.
But
Does that help?
is that a threat?
No, that doesn't help, right? I'm not going to take on h3. Maybe I can go knight
Wait,
to
wait,
h4.
wait. I saw this. Can we go back for a second, please? Sorry.
Of course.
Take on h3, rook g8, king
to
h2.
h2.
Queen g6 first.
Okay.
Rook g1,
Rook
right?
g1, yeah.
Knight f6 now, maybe?
No, but I still take on f5.
And then
And
queen
then
h5.
knight g4, king h1 is nothing. Let me just show this. Oh, yes.
No,
it's
but I can
defended.
simply also
Or
take on
just take
g4.
on g4, yeah.
Because you know, I saw h3. There's a nice line there. I take maybe too much analyzing this position because h3. If he goes h5, and I don't know if I calculate correctly. hg. Now I have e4 because after all the captures, I have a queen h2 at the end.
Oh,
Oh my
that's
god.
very nice.
Where did this come from? Knight takes?
Do I have it? Can we check with the engine or something? If this
I
works
have
actually?
an engine, it's fine.
Oh, you have it? Does it work?
I mean, I don't usually use it. Yeah, it works.
Because the inclusion of the h file, because now after knight e4, I have knight d6, queen h2.
And you're actually checkmating.
So I saw that this must work, but then g takes h3, I couldn't figure out. It would have been. It felt right, but I couldn't see entirely through it.
But you played a5, which felt right as well because you're trying to expand on the queen
a3,
side.
yeah, a5, yeah.
Block that bishop on b7. There's no more c5 coming.
Yeah, a5. I mean, I was surprised later on. I played knight a4. I was trying to make sure he never plays c5, because if he doesn't play c5, I'm okay. It was bad, probably. It was loss of tempo. Rook b1, and then he. Well, I mean, yeah, that was
a shocker.
big shocker. And after bishop b5, then bigger shocker was cd4. I didn't see that one coming at all.
Well, it wasn't a good move.
That's what happens. Yeah. Takes on d4, so he gave up.
Takes, and then king f2, rook e7. Now critical. I think bishop e7 is bad, right? What do you-
So explain
Yeah,
to us
but I
why
had to go
rook
bishop
to
d6.
e8 is not good. Can you explain to us why rook f e8 is not good, doubling up on
yeah,
the
rook
e5?
f e8, because e2 is covered now. I take on f5.
You can just simply take on f5.
Yeah, yeah.
So don't take on d7. That would be a checkmate in one move. But
Yeah,
just
but
simply
this
take on
is-
f5.
Yeah, this is falling apart for black, right?
Yeah, I spent 20 minutes, 15 minutes here, and all my gut feelings was saying I have to go bishop d3, and I still played bishop takes d7.
Well, to be fair, the engine move is knight c3.
Ah.
So, and
But I knew that
they'll
I
feel
have to
too
do
bad.
Knight c3.
Yeah, bishop d3, just to spare you, is
Is
not
worse.
as good as bishop takes d7.
Okay, so okay.
So if those were your two options, you got it right.
All right. Okay, so I took on d7. Probably I'm somewhat better.
+3.
+3? Wow. Yeah, okay.
So not
I
better.
was like, it must be winning, but it's a long way. But 3 + 3. Okay, but it's an engine. I should have taken there again, huh?
Yeah, because this is a
Don't
hard-
worry about those.
This is a hard game to
Those
explain.
question marks. They don't matter too much
Yeah.
in a
I
practical
didn't see-
game.
Okay, knight b6, rook e7. Okay,
Uh,
I will go very fast.
yeah.
Rook e7. Then I think rook e8 is a mistake because he had to go bishop a6 to cover. So rook e8, and then knight a4, and then knight should be winning now. Knight c3, and then
Yeah.
sorry, the queen d3, and then after that, I don't know if I ever blundered. You want to go fast if I ever blundered in time pressure? Oh, didn't see that one. Made a mistake. It's king g6. I just went to grab material in time. We keep missing many wins, huh?
No, it just thinks that, it thinks that +4 and +3, it's not the strongest engine, so it doesn't have
Okay.
any sophistication.
So here I started feeling a little bit worried if a4 is a mistake or not. Yeah, oh, major? Do I let go of the win or still winning?
Do you want the truth?
I felt I blundered.
Yeah, it doesn't like it. It says it's 0.6 because of
Maybe
bishop
bishop
d6. Yeah, bishop d6.
Okay. I felt, yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
such a natural move. What did he play? Bishop to a7?
A7, yeah.
Oh.
And now I was feeling, is it winning after a5 now?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
completely
so,
winning,
yeah.
and now it's
Yeah,
winning.
once I play a5, I was, because now b5, b6 is coming, there's no defense against that, and he played rook a1, but now it's move 40, so I simply found knight f1, finally I'm rerouting, and that's
I really like this move, knight f1, and it's just falling apart. It's funny, this bishop on a7, we love these bishops next to each other, right? They seem so powerful, but they're actually both blocked and not doing anything.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I was so surprised with the cd4, because this structure is really against the bishops, they don't do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely evaluated this better than your opponent in a roller coaster, a bit of a game, but at the end, win secured. Elshan, thanks for joining us
Thanks
here
for having me.
in the studio. No, of course. That was a great,
Thank you.
entertaining game.
I hope I'll manage to show up more often by winning some more games.
No, you gotta show those kids. All right.
I hope so.
Let's take a
And
look,
kids to go.
speaking of kids, of what's going on in the Abhimanyu game is definitely going to be a draw. If we can just take a look at that, you can see that there's not a lot of material left, and the bishop on e6 will certainly hold on. It doesn't matter how much white tries on this one. This bishop is going to hold on to that position. All right, we're going to leave that as a dead draw. Let's finish up Group B. This is the game between Mikhalian and Hanin, and it feels like white made 5 moves in a row.
It does.
This rook was here, right?
Out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere, and this rook somehow teleported all the way down to a7, but black did take the pawn on f4. I don't know who I prefer on this race.
It does feel like white is a little bit ahead, especially with that pawn on a4. Also with the fact that after I pick up the pawn on a5, most likely you're going to have to give a check because, first of all, your knight is under attack.
Yeah, it's
right?
under
so
attack.
you're losing another tempi, important tempi.
Yeah, that being said, I don't have a good square for my king. I really don't want to go back.
Well,
I'm going to be passing my
It's a big
f-pawn,
question.
right?
Which side are you going to go to, right? Are you going to try to go towards the king side to defend against the expansion of black's pawns? Or are you going to try to support your own pawns on the queen side?
The problem is that if I do go this way, right, I would have to go to d2, which I don't really like.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe this is the way. But the thing I don't like about white's position is that my pawn pushes are not obvious to me. I would have to first move the rook, then push the a pawn, whereas I think f5 comes with a lot of tempi. On the other hand, the other side of the story is king on g7.
Exactly.
It's really far away from the action, and it can start warming up to white's chances. This is a double-edged game. You might analyze this with an engine, and it probably will be throwing zeros, but we're not engines, and these are scary endgames for both sides, and
Let's
they're
move
very
to another
difficult
game which is
yeah.
very similar to this one, is the one between Hungaski and Christopher Yu.
Absolutely. And what is going on? Another pawn race, but in this one, I certainly believe in black's chances, simply because you have a passed h pawn. It might not be passed right now, but you start to calculate the move g5, you start to calculate the move h4 following it up. Yes, you're going to pick up a5, but are you on time? My gut instinct is that not even close. I think g5 should be a winning move here. Knight takes a5, I'll just go h4. I don't think Hungaski has any chance of actually saving this one. There might be a couple of tricks here and there that I'm missing, but this looks straightforward to me. I think this pawn just rolls. And meanwhile, let's take a look at the superb game that we have still with us, this game between Hans Niemann and Ray Robson. Let's see where we left it off. Knight c4, queen d3. And we're expecting queen a1 check, followed by queen b2. And only when the queen was on b2, then start playing around with the moves d5 or knight e5 and d5 to secure the rook coming into the attack. Robson played it immediately, actually.
He decided to open up the rook first, and we were talking quite a lot about this position because it's so complex. There's so many ways in which you can play it, and the move orders is so crucial.
So crucial, absolutely. So what do we have? Pawn takes d5, queen a1 check,
A1.
and a big difference in this position. I've already taken this pawn on the d5 square, which gives me a strategical advantage in any endgame, so I'm very happy to trade those queens off. Queen f1 played, queen d4 check, queen f2, queen d1 check. I don't see, as Mishra has finally given up that draw against Titus, I don't really see Black's advantage. I might be missing something, but the constant threat of taking on c4 and simplifying the position, unless there's a killer blow that I'm missing.
Maybe queen to d4. I don't think there's any killer blow. I still think Black has the edge
And
right
they have
now.
played queen d4, queen f2.
Queen to f2, and maybe now I can pick up that pawn finally on d5 because you no longer have any sort of checks, or at least I don't spot them. So what if I just simply take on d5?
All right.
Or maybe knight to e3. Wait. Okay, let's try to go knight to e3.
Knight e3, threatening the move rook
rook
c1.
f6, right?
I don't going
Or
crazy.
queen
Rook
d1,
f6
sorry.
and rook f1.
No, queen d1 is
Queen
a big
d1
threat.
is definitely a threat.
Yeah.
So what do we do here?
And I think this is what Robson is probably looking at. So you cannot go knight to b3 because of queen d1. If you go rook to c1...
Yeah, rook c1 brings down the rook, but it is a little passive. I'm slightly concerned about the move rook f6.
Rook f6, and now let's try to find some sort of knight to b3 maybe.
Knight b3 would be a miracle defense, I have to say.
Knight to b3, and now my idea is if you try to keep your queen on that diagonal, on a7 g1 diagonal, if you go queen b6, maybe rook to c6. Hello again, Alejandro.
Hi, Cristian, good to have you here. It was a long walk all the way back to the desk.
Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise. Let us take a look. I'm going to cheat a little bit because we do have a lot of results coming in. That the move, knight e3 is no good. Queen takes d5 does preserve some chances for Black, but knight e3 forces the move rook c1. We had looked at that. Rook f6, and let's hate engines again. Apparently knight b3 does work.
Knight to b3, yeah.
As well as knight c6. Somehow still holding on to the position. It's difficult to believe, but tactics are tactics. Well, there we have a lot of results. Let's just go back real quick on what has happened today. In Group B, we have 4 out of 5 results. In Group A, let's start with that one. Jeffrey Shong is so far the only winner of the day, having defeated Misha Antipov. Hans Niemann is currently defending a tough position against Ray Robson. That is not going to be an easy task for the Rising Star. Alex Lenderman drew his game against Aram Hakobian. Camille Dragoon, so he did defend that actually, that unpleasant endgame. Camille Dragoon did take that draw against Dario Scherz in the position with the queen against the 2 rooks. And Ilya Nishnik, I'm going to say, survived a tough position against Sam Savion. Meanwhile, in Group B, we also have 4 out of the... we actually have more results than that. Let's just go through them real quick. We have the games of Christopher Repka and Elsha Moriadebari, both with the white pieces, defeating JJ Ali Marandi and Harshit Raja, respectively. We still have the game of Christopher Yu going, and we still do have the game of Mikhalian against Kanin going. We expect that one to be close to a draw, but still a very sharp one.
And we do have a result in Abhimanyu versus Titas.
Right.
That one finished in a draw. But once again, we see Black has had a pretty difficult round. The only victory in Group A, well, White won, that one. And now we see right now on the screen 2 victories for the white pieces in Group B as well. What do you think about that, Alejandro?
I think that Ray Robson might still have a say on that one, as he is the one pressing with the black pieces there, but certainly not a good day for Black. It seemed not necessarily related to the opening in many cases, but the white was able to impose in many positions.
A very tense battle in that one, and we saw some very crafty ideas. We saw that move G5 by Black, try and take advantage of the solidity of the king with those knights next to it. That was a very interesting idea that I will definitely present to my students. I would assume you were going to do the same, Alejandro. What a day.
What a day. I think it's a very interesting tournament. You see the type of chess that we have here at the 25 and 2600 level. It's not quite the elite. We see in many ways lots of mistakes that elite wouldn't make, but still the complexity, the understanding, the subtleties, the calculation, it's all there. It just shows how strong chess players have become. We're going to be signing off here, but remember, you can still follow the remaining games on uschesschamps.com. And tomorrow,
Well, we're going to meet again at 3:30. Don't forget, the game starts at 1 p.m. Central Time, but we're going to start our show a little bit later in the heat of the battle at 3:30 p.m. And until then, well, we're signing off. I'm Grandmaster Cristian Chirila, his Grandmaster Alejandro Ramirez, and we're going to see you guys tomorrow.
Pleasure to be here. See you tomorrow.
This has been a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club. Any reproduction or distribution of this content without the express written consent of the St. Louis Chess Club is prohibited.